Good evening and shalom. Welcome to this episode here of the Watchdog. Quick question. How in the hell does a judge let somebody off of a rapist charge when the rape is caught on video? That is the discussion we're going to be starting off here with today, which I wanted to go right into, because I wanted you guys to understand that this, among other things, has got me in a particularly cantankerous mood, you could say. I'm a little bit fed up with everything that's going on in the news right now, is another way of putting it. But we'll get into all that. Shalom, welcome to this episode of The Watchdog. I am your host, CJ Cox. Welcome, and happy 4th of July. Wait a minute. July. Them Jews done struck again. Just kidding. Just wanted to make fun of Adam Green there. Welcome on this Murica Day special, where we, of course, are going to celebrate Murica Day because it is Murica Day, and Murica is the greatest country that has ever existed in the world, besides arguably the United Kingdom of Israel. And if you disagree, feel free to leave. I have no business, or no need, rather, for you being here. Nor does anybody else who's associated with America. Please excuse me for my coughs and stuff like that. I am a little bit sick. We're going to be getting right into the news today because there's a lot of it. I'm probably going to go for 2 hours because it's a special. It's the 4th of July. You know, barbecues and hot dogs and all that other kind of stuff. I don't get to do that today, so instead, I'm going to do this. I want to get right into that first topic I was talking about. Let me make sure I'm finding the right one. Here it is. Yes, from The Guardian. Teen accused of rape deserves leniency because of his good family, judge says. I'm going to read that abhorrent trash for you one more time. Teen accused of rape deserves leniency because of his good family, judge says. Now, don't worry. If you suddenly feel this revolting feeling, this butterfly in your stomach that's not really the nervousness butterfly, but more like I think I'm going to be literally physically sick and vomit all over my kitchen floor kind of butterfly, I'm right there with you, so don't worry. But we're going to continue into this article because guess what? This is legit. It did actually happen. Bear in mind, excuse me, that this particular rape was actually caught on video. Caught on video. Yeah, straight up. By the way, for those of you who are watching this right now on Facebook, our live version, first time we've been live in a long time, so there's that. That's pretty cool. But be sure to check out the YouTube version because you'll be able to actually read the articles for yourself, see my lovely mug, see the Watchdog still misspelled because I haven't decided to correct it. All that other kind of good stuff. Anyways. Teen accused of rape deserves leniency because of his good family, judge says. Boy 16 allegedly raped girl while recording the incident on the phone. The New Jersey judge praised the suspect's very high academic scores. Because that's the problem right now, is his very high academic scores. A judge suggested that a teenage boy accused of raping a drunk girl at a party should be treated leniently because he came from a good family and cast doubt on whether such an attack amounted to rape at all. Judge James Troiano in New Jersey made the remarks while ruling that the boy, who was identified only as GMC, should not face trial as an adult for allegedly raping a 16-year-old girl while recording the incident on his mobile phone. Quote, this young man comes from a good family who put him into an excellent school where he was doing extremely well, end quote, Troiano said. Quote, he is clearly a candidate for not just college, but probably for a good college. His scores for college entry were very high. Troiano, 69, also noted that the boy was an Eagle Scout. So lovely. Excuse me. I am getting over a cold. Investigators said GMC sent a clip of the alleged rape to 7 of his friends, and later sent a text adding, quote, when your first time having sex is rape, end quote. Yet Troiano suggests that in his view, the alleged incident was a sexual assault rather than a rape. Troiano's remarks, which he delivered at a family court hearing in July 2018, were highlighted this week in a sharply worded overturning of his decision by an appeals court. prosecutors told NJ1015.com they would now seek an indictment from a grand jury so they may prosecute GMC as an adult. Now, we need to pause real quick, because what in the candy-coated shit is this? Please excuse my French. This well, hang on. I can't get too mad, can't start cussing. This is supposed to be close for... This guy has got me several different flavors of screwed up. 32 different flavors of screwed up to make a Baskin-Robbins reference. What relevance at all? At all. Does a person's potential to go to college, does a person's Eagle Scout status, does a person's good grades or good family have to do with a rape that he himself has admitted was a rape? And by the way, I am not one of those people who likes to sit up here and say, well, just because you had sex when you were drunk, you were raped. However, I'm not an idiot. This kid's obviously not an idiot. I know when somebody admits to a crime, they probably have done it. I also know that sharing videos with your friends of a girl who was having sex with you or a boy who was having sex with you is not only a crime, but horribly immoral. And if I knew you and this girl was somebody who I was friends with, I'd probably beat you over the head with a freaking rock. Not that I'm saying that that's justified, but I'm pretty pissed. Okay? And this jackwagon, this disgusting waste of flesh, this filth, lower than one of those disgusting rags talked about in Isaiah, this trash, Troyano, wants to sit up here and say, yeah, but he came from a good family. The hell is that supposed to matter? It's completely ridiculous. Completely insane. It's asinine. It's disgusting. I don't know how many other adjectives you want me to put in front of, or put after this sentence, but it's all of them. It's horrible. And quite frankly, this man should be completely disbarred and potentially even charged with, I don't know what the crime would be. There needs to be some kind of a crime for this level of malpractice in law, though. There needs to be something you can charge this man with. This is completely insane. Prosecutors had alleged that GMC's attack had been sophisticated and predatory and that he showed calculated and cruel behavior by filming the incident and sharing the footage and then lying about it. Adult cases are heard by a jury and typically involve harsher punishments for those convicted, as they should. Records of juvenile cases are largely kept secret from the public. Let me be perfectly frank. If you are 16 years old or older and you commit a rape, you should be charged as an adult. In my opinion, you really should be considered an adult at the age of 16. Now, I'm not going to claim that I haven't benefited from being considered still a minor at the ages of 14, 15, 16, 17. But that doesn't change the point. It infantilizes us as a society to say, you're not an adult until you're 18 years old. And at this point, it might as well be 20 But we continue. But Troyano refused, pointing to GMC's background and saying that, in his view, a traditional case of rape involved more than one attacker using a weapon to take advantage of a victim in a remote location. That is not the definition of rape, you moron! How does this person get put on a judge's seat? Seriously. This is completely insane. The definition of rape, for all of you who may be too stupid to actually understand this, okay? The definition of rape is forceful sexual assault. By the way, all you liberals out there were saying, oh, well, it was sex that I regretted. No, wrong. It is sex that was forceful. It doesn't need to involve a weapon. It can involve somebody who's overpowering or multiple people who are overpowering. It doesn't have to be in a remote location. Plenty of people have been raped in the city limits. In fact, Kitty Genovese was raped and murdered in front of like 18 different witnesses. Go ahead and check out that story. Troyano, you freaking idiot. Anyways, the judge also cast doubt on allegations GMC's victim was too drunk to understand what was happening, asserting that she walked hand in hand with GMC to a basement area where the alleged rape took place. If that was the case, which I know that those things happen, I have been around in high school when those things have happened, when a girl who was drunk all of a sudden decided that she wanted to use that as an excuse for being raped. Okay? You don't admit to being a rapist afterwards when those things happen. Would you like to know why you don't admit to being a rapist after those things happen? Because you're not a rapist. Therefore, there's nothing to admit to. But in this particular case, we have somebody who was literally bragging to his friends about raping somebody. He used the word rape. It's his admission. And by the way, this is on video. It's not like this is disputable. The appeals court panel said Troiano had exceeded his role and decided the case for himself rather than properly reviewing the application by prosecutors to try GMC as an adult. In one dryly scathing passage, the appeals court judge said they hoped juveniles would not be made to stand trial as adults if they do not come from good families and do not have good test scores. Which, by the way, let me just point out another thing. Let's say I'm completely wrong and that this is just a case of two drunk teenagers having sex with each other. The video in and of itself should definitely be a crime. But, you know, let's say we just have to leave it at that. Even still, the fact that your reasoning for letting this person go is he came from a good family and has good test scores, somebody should punch you right square in your teeth. Now, I'm not saying literally go do that, by the way, lest anybody get confused. We can be civil. But I don't want to be civil. So I want to make that perfectly clear. I will be, but I don't want to. This is a completely ridiculous case. And it's cases like this that perpetuate this false notion of a rape culture. Sure, this might be a 1 in a million case, but guess what? It is 2019 and it's a case that's being talked about right now. In our country. At least I believe. Pretty sure this is in our country. The Guardian's a British newspaper, so it might be in Britain. No, New Jersey. Yeah. Obviously. Duh. Read that. Is the Guardian? You know what? I don't even know if the Guardian... I'm pretty sure the Guardian's British. Anyways. Yes, he says U.S. edition. So, anyways. This is completely insane. I mean, this literally revolts me. It's disgusting. The fact that I even have to have this in my newsfeed literally just destroys all hope I have for this planet. And people wonder why people are pessimistic or cynical or misanthropic or etc. Probably because the human race is completely disgusting. Anyways. I need some coffee. Very angry right now. Moving on to some other bullshit. Excuse my French, I'm sorry. I'm really trying to work on that. I do apologize sincerely. I don't know. I grew up around cussers. I'm used to cussing, but I do apologize. So, you know, I want to make this polite conversation and all that other kind of stuff. Let's go to our next article, though. Well, it's not an article, actually. It's just something that caught my attention. Now, actually, you know what? Hang on, I need to go back really quick. If you guys are watching this and you don't want to see something that is inappropriate, or if you have children in the room right now, please just turn off the screen. Unless you don't find, you know, provocative women to be something that is a problem, I guess. There's about to be a provocative woman on the screen, though. You've been forewarned. There's a reason for it, so fret not. So this gem was found on my Twitter, retweeted, by one Mike Cernovich, celebrating the greatest country in the entire world and those who fought to keep it free. Shame on people who disrespect our flag and are lucky enough to live in the USA. Hashtag USA, hashtag America, hashtag Independence Day, hashtag support our troops. With this, yeah, no reason to ruminate on it, but that's what you got right there. It's basically all we need to see, except this isn't just some random patriot, but the chair of the Manhattan GOP, NYC regional vice chair of the New York State Republican Party. You see that right there? Chair of the Manhattan GOP. And then see right here, NYC regional vice chair of the New York State Republican Party. I didn't do a very good job highlighting it all, but nonetheless, you see it right there. That is who this person is. I have so many different things that I need to point out here. And once again, I am infuriated. Let me explain why. First and foremost, I would like to know, Miss Simpleton, how you or any of the simple-minded horn dogs who follow you think it is any less disrespectful to use the flag as a sexual prop, as a guard to your crotch, than to burn it or to step on it or to disgrace it in some other way. How is it any more disrespectful than to use it as a prop to get teenagers to gawk at you than to go on and spit on it? I am genuinely curious. I am genuinely curious. Would you say the same thing about anything else you were trying to honor? Maybe a religious symbol? Maybe some kind of a philosophy that you found to be, I don't know, existential or whatever, right? Probably not. But here you are, feeding your own salacious ego. I don't even think that this has anything to do with supporting the truth. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry, but your breasts and midriff literally have nothing to do with supporting our troops, or with Independence Day, or with the United States. And I'm sorry, but I personally think that this is immensely disrespectful. Now, is it legal? Of course it's legal. I'm not saying you need to take away people's rights. I'm not saying Twitter needs to ban people. We're not commies here. But just because you can say the N-word doesn't mean you should run around calling people the N-word. Likewise, just because you can prance yourself around like a total whore for political reasons doesn't mean that you should. And furthermore, saying that this is somehow not desecrating the flag when you are literally using it as a pornographic prop, soft, don't get me wrong, but that is the whole point of this, is it not? Or here, I'll give you a word that's slightly less graphic, erotic prop. There you go. How is that not disrespectful? How is that not disgraceful to our flag? And furthermore, point number 2, how is it that this person is the chair of the GOP in Manhattan? How is that allowed? How did the GOP allow that to happen? I don't understand. Did we just completely give up on the idea of conservative and polite society? On modesty? On morality? On ethics? Did we just completely give up? Look, I understand that you guys did what me and Ted Cruz and numerous other people had warned the Republican Party about and went with Donald Trump anyway. Right? I understand that you look at the leader of this country and say, well, I guess it doesn't matter anymore because he's cheating on his wife with porn stars and he beat his first wife and he also cheated on his wife with a Playboy model, right? And he lies habitually through his teeth and he's got a huge ego and all this other stuff. But guess what? It's still a problem. It's still a problem. And it's doing nothing but getting worse. I'm sorry. I don't want little girls to grow up thinking that they need to parade their body around in order to be considered a patriot or to have some kind of worth. There's no reason for any gender to be exposing their midriff, to be exposing their breasts, to be exposing their buttocks, to be exposing their genitalia, to have 3-inch shorts. There's no reason for it. What happened to modesty? Why is it that it's okay to prance around in a bikini, but all of a sudden, and by the way, let me just point this out, by the way, when I say this, ladies, you know that I'm correct in this because of the point I'm about to say. But it's not okay, right, to go prance around in your bra and underwear. Why is that? What's the difference? Covers the exact same amount of stuff. But for some reason, this one's fine. See, you know it's not fine subconsciously. And yet you go around parading yourself anyways. And desecrating my flag. And my allegedly conservative party. And I'm sorry, but this is the result of people who decided, you know what, I want somebody to tell the left to F off. I'm going to go with Donald Trump. Let's not be sexist here. Let's be perfectly clear. This is a gender-neutral issue. The conservative movement in the United States is not conservative anymore. Not morally or ethically. Not in the way that we support business and economics. Not in our foreign policy and not in our domestic policy. And Donald Trump has exacerbated that so much that now people are actually sitting here saying there's absolutely no problem with this. In fact, some people in the comment section here had the audacity to say God bless America to this picture. How disgusting is that? God bless America to this filth. I'm sorry, but God does the exact opposite of blessed countries who parade their women around like harlots. And men, you are just as guilty of this for watching it. I am just as guilty of this for every time I ever watched it. It needs to change. The fact that we are letting it pervade not only our entertainment, not only our sports and our academics and our day-to-day news television, but even our political leaders. And as I have reported earlier before with the whole Allie Bath Stuckley and the leggings thing at Mass, even in our churches, it is pervasive, no pun intended. And it's disgusting. It needs to stop. I'm not saying we need to make laws. I'm not saying we need to ban people from Twitter. That's the response of totalitarians and statists. I am saying there needs to be a moral change in you, in me, in us as an American society. And how dare you say God bless America to this filth? You might as well be praying over a pornography video. But anyways, I'm done with this. The news isn't going to get better, by the way. I know this is the 4th of July. It's supposed to be festive. It is festive. If I'm, bumming you guys out with all the stuff that I'm saying with, how, rage-filled I happen to be right now, after this video or before this video, you want to go watch it some other time, it's perfectly fine. It's a happy day. It's the 4th of July. This is the greatest country in the world where we have freedom of speech, where I have the ability to say these kinds of things, right? Great capitalistic nation, great republic. I love it. Go celebrate it if you don't want to be listening to this. It'll always be on YouTube, and you can always listen tomorrow. But if you're trying to listen to some rage-filled stuff, you'll have plenty of time to watch the fireworks. Anyways, moving on to equally infuriating crap from Vox. Well, it's from the Washington Examiner, but it's a result of Vox. No, Vogue. Sorry, Teen Vogue. Same thing. At least it might as well be. Teen Vogue promotes prostitution to an audience of minors. And that's not even its biggest problem, by Madeline Fry from Washington Examiner. You heard that correctly. Teen Vogue promotes prostitution to an audience of minors. And that's not even its biggest problem. Notice how we've started today so far. We're letting rapists off the hook because they have good families. We're parading our women around like harlots and having the audacity to say God bless America while our political leaders dress and act like filth. And now our media and news websites are promoting sex work to kids. Congratulations, America. And by the way, before anybody says, well, I thought you just said 16-year-olds weren't kids. Well, 14-year-olds are, 13-year-olds are preteen at this point. I mean, they're not preteen in the sense of that they're pre-teenager, right? They are 13. However, they're preteen in the sense of that they are still pubescent or prepubescent. In fact, 14-year-olds are as well. And 12, and 11. And we all know that they all read this trash, too. But nonetheless, let's continue. Teen Vogue wants to know that Teen Vogue wants you to know that when you grow up, you can be anything you want, even a prostitute. Imagine your daughter scrolling through an article from a teen website and coming across this line. Quote, I am a doctor, an expert in sexual health. But when you think about it, aren't I a sex worker? And in some ways, aren't we all? End quote. Now, if that sentence isn't just numbifying, if that's even a word, just stupefying, just makes your brain melt and start to fall out of the different orifices, like your ears and nose, for example, then I don't think there's any possibility of helping you. If that's not your reaction. Why is this even remotely okay? See, this is the goal of the left. Complete and total perversion. And you want to know why? And I know that this is supposed to be a secular show, but straight up, it is a religious issue. It is a spirituality issue. When you reject God, this is just the way it goes. You become a liar, you become a deceiver, you become sexually promiscuous, you become somebody who doesn't submit to proper authority, etc. But anyways, the perennially misfiring Teen Vogue is facing controversy again this week. Excuse me. This time for publishing an article titled, "Why Sex Work is Real Work." In it, a doctor argues not only that prostitution should be legalized, but also that it's just like any other career. Author Tlayling Mofakeng, sorry if I mispronounced that, writes. We gotta go down a little bit. Excuse me. Quote, "I find it interesting that as a medical doctor, I exchange payment in the form of money with people to provide them with advice and treatment for sex-related problems, therapy for sexual performance, counseling and therapy for relationship problems, and treatment of sexually transmitted infection. Isn't that basically sex work? Let me just go through all of the different problems. First and foremost, your job as a doctor is not to provide counseling or therapy for relationship problems or therapy for sexual performance. That is not your duty. The fact that you do that is 100% on you and not on anyone else. It's not a doctor's job. Secondly, exchanging payment for treatment of a sex-related problem, like, for example, a UTI or a sexually transmitted disease, or, you know, I guess you could term pregnancy technically although I wouldn't term it a problem, right, is not the same as sex work. Why? Well, because sex work is literally defined as work that is meant to arouse your sexuality. It's erotic. Modeling, for example. Stripping, for example. Pornography, for example. Not being a doctor, unless you're retarded, which apparently this person is. Excuse me, that was mean. I shouldn't have said that. It's one thing to argue for the decriminalization of prostitution. I would agree. It's not inherent. I mean, I do think it's inherently negative to endorse prostitution, but I could see the argument from a limited government standpoint. So that, you know, I'd agree. That's one thing. It's another thing to do so on a teen website. Correct. And to argue that sex work carries with it no more baggage than any other job. Correct. Let me also point out, to say, oh, well, actually he already does, to say that selling sex is the same as becoming a doctor who treats sexual issues is disingenuous at best and dangerous at worst. Let me go ahead and rephrase that. Don't get me wrong, it's not my article. But I would say outright deceitful and evil at worst. Not just dangerous. Encouraging kids to do sex work, to own the cons. Cons meaning conservatives. Yes, sex work is real work, from Teen Vogue. I'm not dismissing the debate, but that maybe Teen Vogue isn't the place to have it. The article also wasn't a debate, but all pro. Which is correct. Excuse me. Was there not one editor at Teen Vogue that thought, hey, maybe this article isn't appropriate for our audience? Teen Vogue. And, you know, obviously they wouldn't, right? I mean, these are the same people who think that having Lil Wayne and Nicki Minaj talk about twerking is completely okay, and, you know, letting little kids listen to it, and watching BET, where they're going to have videos of people twerking, for example, and letting people go to concerts where they're going to mosh and do sexual dances and potentially have sex in the porta potties and all this other kind of crap, and go behind stage where they're being fondled by band members like Davi Vanity, for example, and etc. Right? These are the same people who promote the music industry of all genres, and the movie industry of all genres, and the television industry of all genres. Doesn't mean all individuals. But let's be honest with the subcultures. They're all perverts. We know that. That's why those of us who don't want to be perverts tend to leave those subcultures. And by the way, not just perverts sexually speaking, but perverts in just about any way that you can imagine as far as being unethical. They're violent. They like to steal things from people. They're dishonest, both in the way that they hide from people and also in the way that they outright lie. They don't feel guilt. I can at least acknowledge that sometimes I have been a hypocrite and sometimes I have committed wrong, right? In fact, as a Christian, my entire faith relies upon me, the fact that I am a filthy sinner. There's a difference when you go out and endorse it, when you pervasively do it, when you don't feel guilt about doing it, when you let yourself wallow in the filth. And I don't mean to make that a religious thing. I'm just saying, ethically speaking, regardless of what your faith is, there is a right and a wrong way to act. And the wrong way ends up having the country as a whole wallowing in filth like a pig. Let's just be perfectly frank about that. Give it time. In a few years, the high school guidance counselor will recommend sex work as a career option to school children. Partisan girl, give it time, and we will have 15 and 16-year-olds committing egregious sexual acts on camera, and people defending pedophilia, and people defending incest, and people defending all sorts of debauchery. You trust me on this. Give it time. We're already seeing it right now. Public sex is right around the corner. Orgy houses are right around the corner. I mean, when the right isn't even going to defend people on a sexuality standpoint, right? Nobody will. If Christians aren't even going to do it, then nobody will. And by the way, some Christians are, right? I'm not saying that they all aren't. Nonetheless, let's continue. The website has been no stranger to controversy for some time, after it asked Hillary Clinton to guest edit the magazine, pulled its print issue due to flagging sales, and started pushing online content such as a guide to anal sex, once again, to preteens and teens. By the way, parents, why are you letting your teenagers and pre-teenagers read this filth? I know I said I believe that they should be 16, but that they should be considered adults at 16, but first off, before that, second off, right now they're not. If the point of being their parent is to guide them, then how about you do that? Whatever. According to publisher Condé Nast, quote, Teen Vogue is the young person's guide to saving the world, end quote. But most of its audience, it appears, isn't even young people. As my colleague Tiana Lowe reported this fall, quote, according to data from ComScore, TeenVogue.com had 8,341,000 unique visitors in May 2017. It's probably an estimate. I doubt it's that precise. But anyways, 1 year later, they had barely half that at 4,476,000. Most damningly, just 1.7% of their May 2018 audience was 17 or younger. Be that as it may, doesn't make it any better because that's the people you are trying to go to. Also, I don't necessarily know if I buy that. I'd have to look into that statistic. But if it's true, there you go. Only 2.6% were between 18 to 24 years old. At the absolute most generous estimate, in Teen Vogue's digital audience, the only audience they still have after they shelved their print edition with a final copy featuring Hillary Clinton on the cover, 1 in 20 readers is an actual teenager. And if that be the case, I mean, it's still way too many teenagers that are being pushed into this crap. Your parents shouldn't be doing it. And also, it's still supposed to be marketed to them, which is immoral. But nonetheless, that is at least a good thing. At least if Teen Vogue and the parents of this nation aren't going to defend our youth, at least God will. At least it seems like. The website is no longer about fashion, and it's barely even gathering traffic from teens anymore. That last detail makes it less foul for it to publish what it does. If it gets clicks from middle-aged feminists, quote, sex work and sex worker rights are the litmus test for intersectional feminism, end quote, after all, then Teen Vogue has found finally some success. Guess you could make that position. The problem with its pro-prostitution article, then, is not necessarily that young girls will feel empowered to pursue careers in sex work. Few teens will be reading the website anyway. The trouble with why sex work is real work is its dishonesty. And by the way, it's still dishonest to market this towards teens. Just because you didn't do it successfully does not make it any better. Mofa King writes, quote, evidence, not morality, should guide law reforms and sex work policy for full sex work decriminalization, end quote. Yet the evidence suggests that Mofa King is wrong. Sex work is nothing like other work. As feminist Julie Bindel argued in The Guardian, prostitution is an exploitive exchange, end quote, she wrote. No, not end quote, sorry, begin quote, she wrote. The opposite abolitionist position, favored by feminists including myself and every sex trade survivor I have interviewed, is prostitution is inherently abusive and a cause and a consequence of women's inequality. There is no way to make it safe, and it should be possible to eradicate it. Abolitionists reject this sanitizing description of sex worker and regard prostitution as a form of violence in a neoliberal world in which human flesh has come to be viewed as a commodity like a burger. It's amazing how similar sex-negative feminism and traditionalist conservatism end up sounding, because I almost completely agree with that. The only exception being that when she says it should be possible to get rid of it. Unfortunately, as much as I do want that to be the case, it's never going to happen, right? We're just too evil as a species. None of our crimes are ever going to happen. Specifically, crimes that have to do with hedonism, because we are beings that seek pleasure, sometimes at the expense of others. In fact, usually at the expense of others. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that, 100%. In fact, this has been an issue coming up a lot recently when people would get mad at Sports Illustrated for having the burkini, or people would get mad at the beauty pageants, right? Miss USA pageant, for not wanting to have bikinis anymore. I mean, to be honest, I completely agree. I think it's slightly hypocritical, considering all the women surrounding the bikini lady in the Sports Illustrated magazine were all basically naked. And I think it's slightly hypocritical, considering, regardless of if you're parading their flesh around, you are still parading these Miss USA pageant contestants around as if they are objects, right? And let's be perfectly clear, there's a reason there's still no fat ladies there, right? But it's a step in the right direction, sort of, maybe, depending on how hypocritical they get. But anyways, let's continue. To ignore the rampant abuse in the industry of sex work is to harm women, correct, not to empower them. To promote sex work by ignoring its realities is damaging to the women who participate in it, as well as misleading to intersectional feminists who are eager to support other women in what Mofokeng markets as simply part of women's rights, health rights, and labor rights. Teen Vogue may not be that influential for teens, but it's still wasting its platform. And it's still trying to push this crap on teens. And let me be perfectly clear here, too. Not only is prostitution abusive to women, not only is the porn industry abusive to women, not only is the stripping industry abusive to women, but men, you degrade yourself when you go and decide that you're going to look at that. You do. Because here's the thing. If it's degrading for women to do it, then it's degrading for men to partake of it as well. In fact, I would argue equally degrading. I would. Seriously. You're not supposed to use your body for those sorts of things. You're basically saying that you are nothing more than a pig with sexual impulses, and that's all that you can be controlled at. And I understand that it can be difficult, just like it can be difficult to quit smoking heroin. But guess what? Smoking heroin is wrong, and it degrades you. It degrades your health, it degrades your mind, it degrades your ethics, it degrades your body, like physically speaking. I know I said your health, but I meant more like diseases and things like that, but I guess that's the same thing. It is not the same as regular work, sex work, okay? It isn't. It's one of the worst forms of work that you can get into. And that is for all parties involved. Okay, it is a degrading and disgusting process, and quite frankly, it has done nothing in the past but open the door for sex trafficking, for child sex trafficking, for human trafficking to get slaves across to and fro, right? Organ trafficking, and etc. It is a hotbed for all of this crap. Nonetheless, we continue further on this fantastic day with all of these absolutely brilliant articles. This one isn't quite as infuriating, but it is still very worrying. Oh, I guess I gotta go up. Sorry. Oh, never mind. Wrong article. I thought this was the earthquake article. This one is pretty infuriating. Antifa Proud Boys confrontation in Portland turns violent. Conservative writer injured. Real quick, just want to point out, I don't think it's fair to call Andy Go a conservative writer. That'd be like calling Dave Rubin or Milo Yiannopoulos a conservative writer. Neither of them are conservative. They are right-wing in the modern day. I'd say more independent. They're certainly not necessarily... Well, I'd say center-left, actually, for all three of them. But... yeah, I just want to point that out for the sake of honesty. A little nitpicky, but I know. At least 3 people were arrested, and several others were reported injured as members of Antifa and other leftist groups clashed with members of the Proud Boys and other conservatives around downtown Portland, Oregon on Saturday, police said. One of those injured was Andy Go, a conservative writer who appeared to have been attacked by Antifa members, the Oregonian reported. Go later posted a photo of himself from a hospital with bruises, cuts, and scratches on his face. Has the video here. I'm not going to play it, but if you'd like to go see it, you can. Some of the demonstrators turned violent, throwing milkshakes said to be mixed with quick-drying cement. That has not been confirmed. Raw eggs and pepper spray. They also were using batons. That has been confirmed. Or, I don't know if they were batons or metal poles, but nonetheless, they were beating people with poles. And, of course, they did attack Andy Go, as well as numerous others. This has been caught on video. The gatherings were deemed, quote, civil disturbance and unlawful assembly, end quote, by the Portland Police Bureau, and the perpetrators were believed to include members of both sides. Oh, don't say both sides. Everybody will call you a racist. Just ask Trump about that one. Those arrested were identified as Gage Halapowski, 23, who was charged with multiple counts of assault, including on a public safety officer, James K. Stocks, 21, who was charged with harassment, and Maria C. Dehart, 23, who was charged with disorderly conduct, and harassment. Dehart is the one in the picture. Quote, during today's events, there were multiple assaults reported as well as projectiles thrown at demonstrators and officers, end quote, the police said in a statement. Quote, there were also reports of pepper spray and bear spray being used by people in the crowd. Officers deployed pepper spray during the incident. There were reports of individuals throwing milkshakes with a substance mixed in that was similar to quick-drying cement. One subject was arrested for throwing a substance during the incident. Some chatter back and forth between opposing protesters at 6th and Morrison. It doesn't appear much else going on at this point. This is from gentleman's Twitter. Police just cleared a group from the corner of 6th and Morrison, firing less than lethal rounds of some sort. Pepper spray smell in the air. Portland fire medics were embedded with the Portland Police Bureau members and treated 8 people, including 3 police officers during the event, the Oregonian reported. Here we have another tweet. Now back near 6th and Yamahill, the crowd surrounded some people. At least one milkshake was thrown. Another person jumped onto the grounds of the Pioneer Courthouse and yelled at by the police to get away. Here we have another one. The left-wing demonstrators, easily numbered in the hundreds, marching again south on the Southwest 3rd. First skirmish I've seen. Didn't know how this started, but Mr. Andy Go got roughed up. And, of course, you can go see all these videos if you like. Quote, 3 community members received treatment at area hospitals after they were assaulted with weapons. 2 officers were pepper sprayed during the incident and were treated. Another officer was punched in the arm by a demonstrator and sustained non-life-threatening injury. Another officer sustained a non-life-threatening head injury from a projectile, end quote. The statement said. I believe that is the end of the article. Yes, it is. Okay. So, that's always fun. Protests getting violent, Antifa attacking people yet again. Nothing surprising here, of course. Nothing shocking at all. What else isn't shocking is that the left and the media have been 100% down with saying that with Antifa, saying that Antifa is completely justified in their attacks. In fact, even a lot of members of the right were saying such things. The right, quote unquote, conservatives, quote unquote, constitutionalists, quote unquote. Mitt Romney was the most striking example. I say most striking because he's currently a GOP senator representing Utah, and of course was the presidential candidate in 2012, back when people said it mattered whether or not him or Obama was elected, which turned out to be a lie, apparently, because he's completely down with conservatives being beaten up by members of Antifa. The establishment right, neocons as they're called, don't know why I put quotes in front of that. It's actually that is what they're called. The neocons, right? The left and the major media corporations and big tech are all in cahoots, as well as the different globalist organizations across the world, saying that this is completely fine and that these people are anti-fascist and therefore justified. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. And more blah, because it's completely wrong. It's incorrect. Quite frankly, the more that Antifa attacks, the more violent these situations are going to get. And eventually, some right-wing group will respond in kind. If not worse. Eventually, Antifa themselves will get worse. It's only a matter of time before they kill somebody. They've already gotten close. in the sense of that they did beat somebody over the head with a bike lock. That's a deadly weapon. If you're throwing concrete milkshakes at someone, that would be a deadly weapon, though again, that has not been confirmed yet. If you're beating somebody with metal batons, that would be considered a deadly weapon. Obviously, there was that one Bernie fan who went and shot, well, I forget what the senator's name was, but, went and shot, or a representative, rather. Not Scalise. Scalise is the Supreme Court justice, but it was like Scalise. Like maybe Scalia? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section. Anyways, it's only a matter of time before this gets more violent. We are getting closer and closer to what I believe is an inevitable civil war in this country. And I do mean inevitable. It will happen. Whether or not it's a localized conflict to Oregon and Cali and something like that, or, a massive war that has us completely divided like the American Civil War, I guess I don't know. But it is going to happen. It's only a matter of time at this point. I mean, we're already much more violent than we were in the 60s, and the fact that we avoided a civil war in the 60s is mind-boggling. Maybe this is kind of like a, like they say in Final Destination, death doesn't like to be tricked, doesn't like to be cheated. And maybe this is it coming back, right? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe God just gave us a little bit of time, and now that time's up. Who knows? How did this all start, though? Well, it started with this whole situation. Oregon Senator Brian Boquist faces complaint after threatening state police. Why did he threaten state police? Well, because you see him and other members of the Oregon Senate, specifically Republican members, decided that they were going to walk out of the legislative meeting and say, we're not going to be here, we're not going to vote with you today, when a bill to combat climate change was coming out. And of course, this bill did all the usual things, right? Said we're going to, tax methane and tax carbon and all that other kind of crap. And so they walked out, Boquist and the other senators, right? And the governor decided, the Democratic governor decided, you know what, I'm going to be a dictator. I'm going to get the National Guard and police and take these people at gunpoint and arrest them and force them to come to this meeting. To which the senators, led by Boquist, who was the most vocal of them, replied, send bachelors and bring them heavily armed, and started hanging around with Idahoan, Washingtonian, and Oregonian militias, who then proceeded to show up in Oregon armed, and eventually led to all of this. Quite frankly, I think Oregon is probably ground zero for where a civil war is going to happen. But nonetheless, now Boquist is facing a complaint for threatening state police after he has returned. Sessions are back in progress. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and read this. A formal complaint has been filed against Senator Brian Boquist, a Republican from Dallas, that is Dallas, Oregon, who drew criticism for threatening state police and amid a GOP walkout over climate legislation, the chairman of the state's conduct committee said Saturday. Oh, why is it not loaded? Come on, guy, don't be like that. What? That's super uncool. I do apologize for this, friends. This was not the way it was earlier. Let me see if I can refresh this and get the article back. Oh, there we go. Cool. Senator... Oh, no! Why did he do it again? I have to answer the survey. Real weak. I'm going to go ahead and pause this video real quick while I answer this stupid survey. My apologies, friends. Alright, now that we're done with that, my apologies. Anyways, returning. Senator Floyd Prozanski, a Democrat from Eugene, who chairs the Senate Special Committee on Conduct, told Oregon Public Broadcasting that the complaint will receive a hearing in early July. He declined to elaborate on the substance of the complaint and would not say who filed it. Quote, I will not make any comments. Excuse me, I got dead skin on my lips. I will not make any comments as to what's alleged or what's in the report because it's pending before the committee, Prozanski said. Quote, as the chair, I do not believe it's appropriate for me to make comment until we as a full committee take what actions we're going to take, end quote. Boquist came under fire this month after saying Oregon State Police should send bachelors and come heavily armed, that's a quote, by the way, if they attempted to bring him to the Capitol amid a Republican walkout that shut down the Senate for 9 days. Let me be perfectly clear. I do not agree with violence. I would prefer nonviolence in every situation. I think that civil war is a very dangerous thing, and I don't want it. That being said, I think sometimes people their hand is forced. You know what I mean? And I think in this case, Senator Boquist and a lot of people on the right, their hand is forced. If people want to take our liberties, and if they're going to stop at nothing to do so, then, the line's been drawn. You can't say anything past that. You know what I mean? Nonetheless, Republicans make up... sorry, man. Got so much dead skin. Republicans who make up the minority in the legislature refused to come to the Capitol in protest of legislation aimed at lowering the state's greenhouse gas emissions. Democrats have an 18-12 majority in the Senate, but need at least 20 members, which is a two-thirds majority, and therefore at least 2 Republicans present to vote on legislation. Governor Kate Brown deployed the Oregon State Police to track down the missing Republicans and hit them with a $500 fine for every day they missed. Boquist publicly lashed out against the Senate president just prior to the walkout, saying, quote, if you send the state police to get me, hell's coming to visit you personally. Days later, the Senate leader ordered the Capitol closed because of a possible militia threat from far-right groups, allegedly far-right groups. They're just constitutionalists, but nonetheless, who said they would join a peaceful protest organized by Republicans. The threat, however, never materialized. Of course, it never materialized because it was shut down. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's so annoying. Anyways, I should have worried about this earlier. One of those groups, the Oregon 3 Percenters, joined an armed takeover of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in 2016 and has offered safe passage to senators on the run. I'm actually a big fan of the Oregon 3 Percenters and was a big supporter of their takeover of the Wildlife Refuge in 2016. Which I know people want to call them terrorists. Everything was nonviolent. They were armed just in case, but there's a difference between self-defense and attacking someone, and they never used those weapons. So, all right. Done. Sorry. Boquist was one of 3 senators to not appear on the floor Saturday morning. The Republican staff members expected him to return later in the afternoon. He did not return requests for comment. And this is, of course, what started everything that led to this big riot in Portland that has now led Andy-Go to get beaten up. So what do we make of this? Well, Oregon seems to be a hotbed for this kind of stuff. And, there was obviously the Berkeley thing. There was obviously the Proud Boys thing in New York. There was obviously Charlottesville. So it's not like violence and confrontation hasn't happened elsewhere. But we already noted the 2016 Wildlife Refuge takeover, right? There was also this most recent incident here and the riots in Portland that came afterwards. There has also been members of Antifa who have attacked people in Portland before, who have attacked people just over the river in Washington before, in Vancouver, right? They have put posters and stuff like that threatening people. They have placed bombs in Eugene Police Department and had protests that got violent this year in January, I believe it was. They have had people who were associated with them bring firearms onto school property, which I'm not necessarily saying means anything, but may or may not mean something, right? You never really know. I don't know. That one, it's hard to say, but, the man was coming to pick up a child he did not have legal custody of. He did pull out the gun on police officers. He did, people did call, the Antifa members did call him their comrade and say that they killed our comrade and start a whole riot over it. Well, it was more of a protest, but, there was altercation. and etc., right? Oregon seems to be a hotbed for these issues, and I think it may actually be ground zero for the coming American Civil War, and I mean that. Specifically, the Portland, Vancouver, Washington area. I mean, I find it to be very likely, especially considering the fact that the politicians themselves are using violent language against each other, and that the police and National Guard are being used by different political parties to go and find others who are then finding solace in militia groups. I mean, that just sounds like we're escalating at a very fast pace towards conflict. And specifically in Oregon. And this, of course, would inevitably spill over into California, into Idaho, into Washington, regardless of how big the conflict actually got. You know, whether or not, like I said, it would divide the entire country, we would just have to wait and see, unfortunately. I mean, you're right, we can't just say definitively, no, we'll keep it nice and contained. A lot of Americans aren't familiar with having to deal with an issue like this because, quite frankly, we haven't had to in a very long time. You can make an argument that, you know, Weather Underground was kind of like this, but Weather Underground was, I mean, you know, in the end, it turned out to be no harm, no foul. And they weren't actually intending on killing people. I'd just like to point out, as much as I, you know, completely disagree with Weather Underground, they were not attempting to kill people, to the best of my knowledge. They were attempting to bomb buildings. It's still violence, but I think there is a very distinct difference between violence against property and violence against people. Antifa has graduated to violence against people. And Weather Underground had a lot of time to be violent against people. Now, if I'm wrong about that, by all means, comment in the comment section down below, and I'll issue a correction. But nonetheless. And, you know, you had Black Panther groups who had weapons and would march armed. Same thing with some KKK groups in the last 100 years. Obviously, Black Lives Matter has gotten violent before. I don't think there's been anything in our generation, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, quite like Antifa. Quite as prolific in their violence, quite as willing to commit acts of violence, quite as blatant with their disregard for freedom of speech, for freedom of religion, for freedom of the press. With as many altercations as they get in, with as vehemently devout, really, a support base as they have, right? We, of course, are reminded of Steven Crowder when he infiltrated Antifa and they were giving out knives and ice picks and things of that nature. We are, of course, reminded of them burning down, not burning down, but of lighting fire to Berkeley in response to Milo Yiannopoulos being there. Of beating people over the head with bike locks. Potentially, they've started throwing cement milkshakes, and they did place a bomb in Eugene's police department earlier this year. And I don't personally see, especially with big tech supporting them, especially with Hollywood supporting them, and the entertainment industry, regardless of where you go, supporting them, and with the outright lies being told about members on the right, whether they be traditionalist right like Ted Cruz or this new neoliberal right like Donald Trump, right? I don't see how this doesn't lead to full-scale conflict. I just personally don't see it. I think it's inevitable. I think when it happens, we're going to be in for a rude awakening when we realize just how bloody this is. You know, it's not like it hasn't happened before. You can make an argument the Native American groups were insurgents, but even if you want to disregard those, the KKK back in the 1800s was outright a terrorist organization. But nobody was alive in the 1800s or when we were fighting Native Americans. Were they? This is something none of us are used to. At best, you can make an argument that maybe people in the ghetto who have had to fight gang wars might be kind of used to it. That's about it. And it's coming. It is coming. You mark my words. It is coming, and it is coming with a fury. And people will die. Rich people, poor people, men and women, virgin and non-virgin, Christian and non-Christian. It's going to rain on the just and the unjust alike, and there is nothing we can do to stop it, barring the grace of God. And with that incredibly depressing point, we're going to take an intermission because since this is a 2-hour video, and since it's Murica Day, we're going to look at some cool memes that have to do with America and listen to some Murican music. So, yeah, fantastic. Everybody, how's it going? Gonna have a little bit of an intermission here. Shalom, all that good stuff. We'll be back in about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes, however long it takes to listen to 2 songs.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I'd thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God
Welcome back, guys. For those of you who are watching this live, I did want to apologize. Number one, the intermission took about 35 minutes, which is much longer than was expected. Excuse me. Number two, excuse me again. You guys obviously don't get to partake in the lovely tunes that I was playing for the intermission because, of course, I have to record them using all of the devices I have here and, you know, get it all edited and stuff like that. And number three, this actually didn't end up being paused, so if you're watching it live, it's actually broken into two parts. For those of you who are not watching this live, but are rather watching this on YouTube, I hope you appreciate the music. We're going to go for another about an hour with some of these other topics. Continue on with our day. I apologize. I know this is a festive and jolly holiday, right? We're obviously celebrating our freedoms. We're celebrating the men and women who died to bring us our freedoms. We're celebrating our flag. We're celebrating the blessings we've received from our Lord and Savior. Celebrating our Constitution. But with all of that being said, unfortunately, you know, just because it's a holiday doesn't make the news positive by any means. So, I'm sorry. Let's continue. Our next article that we have is in regards to Mr. Colin Kaepernick. Our good friend Kaepernick has decided... Oh, this article's not here anymore. Let me go back. Our good friend Kaepernick has decided that he doesn't want Nike to have Betsy Ross shoes. Betsy Ross flag, for those of you who don't know, is the original American flag, stars and stripes, but it's got the circle with the 13 stars to represent the 13 colonies, still 13 stripes, of course. Named so because it is believed to be designed by a woman named Betsy Ross. Shocking, I know. Colin Kaepernick has recently said that he thinks the Betsy Ross flag is racist, that the Betsy Ross flag is a symbol of oppression or something along those lines. I'm not entirely sure if you guys can hear this. It says it's muted, but it's not pausing, and it's really irritating me. So if you guys can hear this, I do apologize right now. Nonetheless, continuing. Now, of course, we recall Kaepernick was saying that the whole flag thing had nothing to do with the flag. It had nothing to do with disliking America, but rather it had to do with protesting police brutality. And a lot of the people who were saying that he shouldn't be doing this, including myself, which, by the way, that doesn't mean he doesn't have a right to do it. It means rather that he shouldn't be doing it. There is a difference. There's a difference between calling for somebody's job or calling for somebody to be arrested or shut down or something like that and saying what they are saying is incorrect, either morally or politically or economically or whatever, right? So I just want to point that out lest anybody think that I was calling for Kaepernick to lose his job or to, to be arrested or something like that. No, I actually rather like his playing style. As a matter of fact, I've liked him ever since he was a player at Nevada. He's a very good quarterback. But nonetheless, he was saying it wasn't about the flag. It's not about the country. It's not about any of that. It's just about police brutality, blah, blah, blah. And the signs were there because, first off, this form of protest is a very disrespectful protest to the flag in particular. You're saying, I refuse to stand for this flag because I don't believe in what it stands for or I don't believe in what it represents or whatever, right? But then, of course, he started... getting his hair in the traditional Afro style, and I say traditional because it's traditional for black activists, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's a red flag. Then he starts wearing Che Guevara shirts and wearing socks, talking about Fidel Castro, or representing Fidel Castro, rather, who is a brutal dictator, who slaughtered Christians, who slaughtered homosexuals, who slaughtered people who had a conservative mindset, people who had a Republican mindset, etc., right, who's just all around an evil person who destroyed any, sort of ability for freedom of the press, for freedom of speech, and etc. Had the Cuban people under his thumb for decades, right? And that's when it kind of started becoming, I don't know about this whole not hating America thing. I think you actually do hate America, and that this whole police brutality thing is just your way of expressing it, like it is for so many other leftists. Then, of course, his girlfriend started saying that Ozzie Newsome, who is black, was racist and wasn't going to pick up Colin Kaepernick because he was racist, even though Colin Kaepernick is only half black, raised by white people, and Ozzie Newsome is black and raised by black people. But, of course, who says you have to be intelligent in this day and age? Anyways, and I think at that moment, a lot of people who were kind of holding out hope for Kaepernick, who weren't already like firmly in his camp, we basically got it at that point, right? It's like, all right, cool. You don't like the United States. You don't like America. A lot of people were then further pushed away when he ended up taking a settlement and making the whole Nike stand for what you believe in thing. Everybody thought it was just a political ploy. Well, if there was any doubt for those of you who have not been convinced yet, which it is utterly shocking to me that you could not be convinced. Again, you can like him as a player. I very much enjoy Colin Kaepernick as a player. I think he should be in the NFL, as a matter of fact. I happen to think that it is definitely because he was kneeling and not because of his play that he is out of the NFL, because there is not 32 quarterbacks in the NFL better than him. And it wouldn't be the first time either. Tim Tebow was too controversial because of his unorthodox playing style and his faith. Ray Rice was too controversial because he hit his girlfriend, right? So the NFL just hates controversy, and in order for you to be somebody who they decide to have back, you either need to have a significantly long punishment like Michael Vick, like Ricky Williams, like Pac-Man Jones, right, where it's either prison time or year-long suspensions, or you just have to be exceptionally good, which, for the record, all three of those people actually are. They're just outstanding players. I personally think the same thing for Kaepernick and for Rice and for Tebow, obviously all for different reasons. And by the way, another thing too, I'm not comparing what they did, right? I'm comparing the controversy that came as a result of what they did, lest anybody take this out of context, but nonetheless. But despite all that, I'm not going to be ignorant just because I happen to be a fan of the man. It's perfectly clear that he does not like this country. I think he should go play football in Canada. Not only because it would continue to get him a job, but also because if you hate this country so much, if you want a socialist, utopian, post-racial, leftist kind of nation, there happens to exist one right across the border. Go to it. You could even have a job and keep your Nike sponsorship, right? And quite frankly, they'd probably take you. Why you got to be here, right? But nonetheless, Kaepernick showing his true colors. Nike, by listening to Kaepernick showing its true colors, proving to the world that they have absolutely no spine at all, or if they do have a spine, it's a gelatinous spine analogous to a jellyfish spine, if you could imagine a jellyfish having a spine. I don't think jellyfish have spines, but if you could imagine a jellyfish having a spine, right? Something along those lines, gelatinous and floppy, and all that other kind of stuff. Weaker than cartilage, even. They decided to pull it, and here we are, talking about this. And from the Detroit Free Press, we get, like it or not, Nike's Betsy Ross controversy shows politics and sports is here to stay. And as disgusted as I am with that sentiment, I have a feeling it's actually exactly correct. Earlier this week, Nike scrapped a new shoe model with an emblem of the Betsy Ross flag emblazoned on its heel. By the way, don't shop at Nike. If you support this country, don't shop at Nike. Don't buy Nike products. Okay, it's one thing to have people who don't believe the same way you do. It's another thing to actively go against the country that gives you the freedom to make the billions that you make. Or in the case of Kaepernick, to make the complaints that you make. There's no reason to be purchasing their product at this point, I don't think. Like, if they're really going to be so egregious and un-American as to say, oh, no, we're going to pull this. We already made millions of them, but we're going to pull it because it might be offensive. And, of course, other morons on different websites and leftist news organizations have been comparing the Betsy Ross flag to the Nazi flag because they're stupid. I mean, I just, that sentiment, that statement, whatever you want to call it, it kills my brain cells. It's not only that it lacks thought itself, but it's so stupid, so pervasively ignorant that it actually infects the minds of people who are actually reasonably intelligent and starts to kill their brain cells, almost like some sort of plague of logic plague or something like that. Nonetheless, Colin Kaepernick, the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback and current ambassador to Nike, thought the new shoe sent the wrong message. And what message would that be, Kaepernick? That it's the 4th of July and we love the country that gives you the ability to have this capitalist mentality and also the freedom of speech that you so enjoy? That allows you to vote in the elections that you decide you're not going to vote in, etc. Reaction to the company's move and to news that Kaepernick was behind it was predictable and fell along the political lines you'd expect. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, a Republican, announced he was pulling the state's offer of $1 million in grant incentives if Nike were to build a plant in Goodyear, a suburb of Phoenix. Don't get me wrong, I support that, but quite frankly, that shouldn't have existed in the first place. So, yeah, there's that. Anyways, quote, "Words cannot express my disappointment at this terrible decision," end quote. He tweeted Tuesday, rather. Quote, "I'm embarrassed for Nike," end quote. The mayor of Goodyear apparently is not. Quote, "While I appreciate the emotion and discussion I've heard on this topic," end quote, wrote Georgia Lord, also a Republican on a Facebook account, quote, "This deal is expected to bring more than 500 jobs and significant investment in our city. We will honor the commitment we made in our agreement." I don't understand why any government incentives need to be given to companies for them to be built. Quite frankly, this is why I like tariffs. Okay, if you are going to, like, if you're going to make me pay you to give Americans jobs, then hell yes, I am going to tax your imports when they come into my country. Like, I will never understand why conservatives are against tariffs. I got to point that out. But anyways. The state can't control whether cities offer companies tax breaks. And while Ducey is free to grandstand, Lord is free to consider jobs. Kaepernick, meanwhile, hasn't said anything publicly. Though he doesn't need to, he expressed his opinion for which Nike pays him, and the shoe was yanked. Whatever you think about Kaepernick, whose kneeling protest during the national anthem of NFL games turned him into a cultural lightning rod, we can all agree that sports and politics are inseparable. Look no further than the U.S. women's soccer team, whose biggest star, Megan Rapinoe, recently said she would skip an invitation from President Donald Trump if it was extended. Which, quite frankly, anybody who disrespects the president like that, in my opinion, just needs to get their head checked. I understand disagreeing with the guy. I disagree with Trump. I disagree with Obama as well. If he invited me to the White House, I would certainly accept. It's just a respect thing at that point. Quite frankly, if the king of Saudi Arabia or an imam in Iran invited me for a meal and invited me to just hang out for a little bit, I guess, yeah, I would accept. It's just the polite thing to do. That's what polite society does. We're okay with having dialogue and having meals with our enemies. But apparently, the modern world isn't. Excuse me. Quote, "I'm not going to the bleeping White House," end quote, she said. Trump admonished her on Twitter, then extended an invitation to the team anyway. Thousands of his supporters responded too by suggesting they were no longer rooting for the team. The U.S. is set to play the Netherlands in the World Cup final Sunday. I personally can't bring myself to do that. I don't know. I'm always cheering for the American team. You know what I mean? So, but I understand why people would. I definitely feel that. I understand that sentiment 100%, actually. As it happens, Nike sponsors the team and sells its jerseys, to which you may ask, what has it done for sales? Juice them. This week, ESPN reported that the home version of the team's jersey is Nike's top-selling jersey this year, and that it set an all-time record for soccer jersey sales in one season on Nike.com. Clearly, when one side feels attacked, it often reacts by opening its collective wallet, which, of course, is the reason why all these different companies do this in the first place. It's the same reason why they all support gay pride. It's the same reason why there's naked women in Carl's Jr. commercials. It's the same reason why, Dove has commercials about transgenders, even though there's absolutely nothing that transgenderism has to do with soap, etc. It's the same reason why there's puppies in Budweiser, right? It's advertising, and people are really dumb, so they fall for it. We'll see if this holds true in the shoe controversy. Twitter was aflame with protesters burning Nikes when word leaked that the company pulled its Betsy Ross shoe, which featured the red and white striped flag with 13 stars forming a circle representing the unification of the country's founding colonies. By the way, let me just point out, the whole burning Nike's product thing is kind of stupid. If you already owned the product, then this particular comment does not apply to you. But if you buy somebody's product so that you can light it on fire, I just want you to think that process through. Because clearly, they want you to buy their product and couldn't conceivably care less if you lit it on fire afterwards. They already have the money. Furthermore, I don't think you should feed the outrage by, lighting stuff on fire and then posting it on Facebook. Just don't buy their product and move on. and they'll start losing sales if enough people stop buying their product, right? But when you feed the controversy, not only does it further divide the country, but it raises their sales too. Controversy sells very, very, very much so. Just look at M&M or South Park if you need any sort of, or just Nike itself, right? If you need any sort of verification of that fact. We'll see. Sorry, I already read that. You can argue that Nike took a chance by yanking its flag emblazoned shoe, but I doubt it. The company understands its consumer base better than politicians do. That's why it hired Kaepernick, even though he no longer plays football. And this is completely correct. The kinds of people who are going to buy Nike products, for the most part, are going to be the kinds of people who hate Trump and etc., who hate the country, right? And unfortunately, those two are the same thing at this point. I consider myself a patriot, and I am not a Trump supporter, but, that's the world we're in right now. So, whatever. Maybe that makes you angry, or maybe it makes you feel emboldened. What matters is what matters is that makes you feel, which is why more and more athletes speak up for the causes in which they believe, and why more sports-based companies don't mind wading into the intersection of sports and politics. Don't get me wrong, you have a right to do that. I personally believe the Anquan Boldin route is the best route to go. Play football and do the stuff you're going to do, but play football primarily when you're playing football. If you want to be a social or political figure, retire. And then go on to be a social or political figure. You could consider that the Trump model, too, in the sense that he's not, a celebrity anymore. He's now the president of the United States, and he needs to give up on his celebrity endeavors and now become the president of the United States. That's just my opinion. It's a free country, so you don't have to follow my opinion. But nonetheless. They want a reaction because they know it's a wide intersection where millions and millions of us operate. Many of us actively look to sports for commentary on social issues. That is definitely true. Many athletes use their platforms to try to bring change. 30 years ago, sports did everything it could to stay out of the political sphere. That time is gone. So was the time when the American flag wasn't so politicized. It's always been a symbol of patriotism. When I was much younger and I spotted a flag flying from my house, or from a house rather, or atop a pole at an outdoor gathering, I assumed its owner had served in the military or just loved the idea of our country. Even though both of those things may still be true, I don't make those associations anymore. The flag is a repository for politics now, not just patriotism. Groups like the KKK understand this, which is why some chapters of that repugnant band of haters have tried to co-opt the Betsy Ross version of the flag, presumably to show a symbol of when the country was still allowed for slavery. That is completely ridiculous. And I have to say, I firmly disagree with the writer of this article on that point. Members of the KKK fly the American flag and fly the Betsy Ross flag because patriotism has actually always been a part of the KKK's rhetoric, as has a form of kind of like Christian theocracy. Unfortunately, and I disagree with that vehemently, but that is why. It has nothing to do with them reminiscing for a time when, back in the day, right? It has everything to do with the fact that, for the most part, they tend to be patriots. They tend to be people who are small government. Just like, for the most part, black supremacists tend to be anti-American and tend to be for large government. Does that mean everybody who's for large government or is anti-American is a black supremacist? No. Does that mean everybody who happens to be pro-America and is for limited government is a white supremacist? No. It does, however, mean that people are not so simple as to say absolutely everything that they do is because of their white ideology or their black ideology, supremacist ideology, I mean. It's too simplistic, and it's quite frankly ridiculous. This is what Colin Kaepernick reacted to when he learned about the shoe and what he reportedly told Nike. He worried that the symbolism could be offensive. Well, it's not. And if you think it is, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you are doing in this country. You should leave. You should go somewhere where you're happy to be. Quite frankly, I find it repugnant that you could sit here and make the millions of dollars that you do because of our capitalist society and also because of our, quite frankly, hedonistic society, which is one of the things about America I actually disagree with. Because, right, you play sports and sell fashion, right? You're not doing, like, business or educating people or anything like that. But nonetheless, a country that allows you to speak the way that you speak, that gives you the press to publish this stuff, that you could then turn around and attack that country and attack that Constitution and attack those founding fathers makes absolutely no sense to me. I find it repugnant. But with all that said, you do have a right to do it. Just because I think you should leave the country doesn't mean you have to, nor does it mean I would legally force you to. I just don't understand what you're doing here. Personally, if I hated this country, I would go to whatever country I preferred best. That's just my opinion. But whatever. But if you'll forgive the pun, if it's that hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes to comprehend that the colonial era flag suggests an uglier time in our history. Yes, it is. It is that hard. Because to be perfectly frank with you, the idea that America is a racist nation that was founded in racism is wrong. It's incorrect. Racism happened to exist in America in the past. That doesn't mean that our foundations are rooted in racism. That doesn't mean our flag represents racism. This is the same point everybody's been trying to make about the Confederate flag. And everybody says, well, what about the Nazi flag? Nazism represented an ideology that specifically, its sole reason for existing was German domination, blonde-haired, blue-eyed domination, massacre of Jews, massacre of gypsies, treating black people like animals, and world conquest. That's what it was. It wasn't the flag of a nation, it was the flag of a political party, and that political party happened to control the nation. It's just as much of a symbol of Germany, or of white people, or of German people, or of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, as the Chinese Communist flag is of China, or of Buddhism, or of Chinese people. The Betsy Ross flag was our national flag. It was the flag in which our Constitution and Declaration of Independence were forged. The Confederate flag, as much as many people might disagree with it, was a flag that, while yes, had significant amounts to do with slavery, and we can recognize that, also had significant amounts to do with people trying to preserve their way of life and not knowing any better. And we can have grace for people while understanding that they were wrong. Especially when you consider the fact that these people were being invaded by people who they considered their own countrymen. That 4 of the 11 nations that seceded because they thought that invasion was wrong. That the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 2 years into the war, and that it was a Southerner by the name of Cassius Clay who was the one pushing that anyways, not Abraham Lincoln. But we can forget all that, right? And we can forget what the Betsy Ross flag stood for, or what the Gadsden flag stands for, or what the American flag today stands for. We can forget all that because Colin Kaepernick's little feelings are hurt because slavery happened to exist at the time. I'm sorry, I just don't, I don't buy that as a legitimate argument at all. And I have no intention of ever not flying my American flag unless God himself tells me so. Or this country becomes offensive to him, which I guess you could make an argument it's getting there, nonetheless. Nike is betting you can, or that enough of you can, not that we should look to sporting goods companies to tell us how to celebrate the country's birthday, yet companies and corporations, for better or worse, shape our culture, so do politicians, and so do athletes. Correct. This last week was another reminder, the institutions of public life have never been more intertwined. So state your case and have your say, because athletes and politicians will, as they have the past few days. No, it doesn't make you anti-American if you found the antiquated flag a symbol of division, as some have suggested. It makes you an American. No, it doesn't. It does make you anti-American. I'm sorry. I'm not here to sit and, beat around the bush with you. It makes you anti-American. If you are against the flag, if you are somebody who thinks that George Washington is a disgusting person, or the founding fathers are disgusting people, if you're somebody who is against the Betsy Ross flag, if somebody who's against the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, okay, then you are anti-American. Do you have a right to be anti-American? Yes, you do. And by the way, all those conservatives who say otherwise, you're not really a conservative. Conservative is somebody who will conserve the country as it was, i.e. the United States Constitution, which gives you the right to be anti-American. However, let's be perfectly clear, those of you who are for the pulling of these kinds of things, for getting rid of the flag and things like that, you are anti-American. Let's not beat around the bush here. And you know you're anti-American. There's no reason to lie. Don't have to sell wolf tickets to kick it, as they used to say in Reno. But anyways, these days, it probably makes you an athlete too. Blah, blah, blah. Moving on to our next article. Earthquake rattles South California. And they are saying this is the biggest earthquake in 20 years. The quake, a 6.4 earthquake, hit Southern California, about 150 miles north of Los Angeles, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, the strongest to hit Southern California in 20 years. By the way, this is from Certainly Not News, written by Veronica Rocha, Meg Wagner, and Elise Hammond. The aftershocks, at least 159 aftershocks have been recorded today. Dr. Lucy Jones, a seismologist, said there's a 50% chance of another large quake in the next week. Very scary stuff. A 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit Southern California this morning. We're wrapping up our live coverage, but here's what we know so far about the quake. Where it hit. The earthquake was centered near Ridgecrest, California, a community west of the Mojave Desert and about 150 miles north of Los Angeles. It was felt in both Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It was the worst in decades. The quake was the largest quake to hit the area since 1999, when a 7.1 earthquake struck a remote area of the Mojave Desert. There was a lot of aftershocks, at least 159 have been recorded today. About the damage. The earthquake left scattered damage throughout the region. Footage from Ridgecrest showed firefighters hosing down flames rising from the homes, and there were also power outages in the city of 28,000 residents. There's still a risk. Dr. Lucy Jones, a seismologist, said there's a 50% chance of another large quake in the next week. She added that there is a 1 in 20 chance that a bigger quake will hit within the next few days. At least 159 aftershocks reported after today's earthquake. So far, there's been at least 159 aftershocks recorded above magnitude 2.5 following today's 6.4 magnitude earthquake. Experts say that while this is higher than usual, it is not unprecedented. In the coming weeks, seismologist Robert Graves said there's a 9% chance of another earthquake greater than 6.4 magnitude and a 20% chance of one greater than 5. As time passes, these probabilities will drop significantly. So be looking in the coming weeks. There's potential for South California to be hit pretty hard, and we, of course, have been waiting for one of the areas around the Ring of Fire to be hit by a pretty massive earthquake here soon, according to numerous seismologists from all across the globe. Is this it? Maybe. Is it not it? Maybe. We never know. But we'll see what happens. Geologists went to where there were reports of ground cracks and faulting this afternoon. Experts have said they think there were 2 active faults, but have not identified them yet. The quake has a name. Seismologists are calling the morning 6.4 quake the Searless Valley quake. The number of aftershocks continue to rise. More than 85 aftershocks of magnitude 2.5 or greater have been recorded after an earthquake. So this is obviously before the 159, so it's actually relatively irrelevant. Reporting on this because it is important, right? Obviously. And like I said, we are waiting for an earthquake to hit somewhere on the Ring of Fire, according to experts and seismologists. For religious reasons, I personally think it will be California, but it may not be. But, you know, it is definitely important to report on, even despite those threats and even despite my own religious beliefs, because it is a natural disaster that has happened in the United States. Really, a natural disaster that's happened anywhere is worthy of reporting. Luckily, it seems like there isn't very much damage and that nobody has died or been injured. At least there hasn't been reports of that, but we'll see, right? Not much more to be said other than that. So, you know, that is obviously the case with natural disaster articles. They're kind of just very straightforward. But nonetheless, let's move forward. The Grand Blasphemous, Pope Francis and Putin, meet at the Vatican, discuss Syria and the Ukraine. This is from Elizabeth Laurente of Fox News. I wonder if you guys can hear that. There's fireworks going on outside my house right now. Of course, if you can't hear that, my question for you is, why are you watching this and not watching fireworks? Well, why are you doing this and not watching fireworks? Because I'm a loser, okay? Stop probing. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, a day before he is scheduled to meet with Ukrainian Catholic leaders, Pope Francis welcomed Russian President Vladimir Putin Thursday, speaking with him for just under an hour about a variety of issues. Francis and Putin, who met at the Vatican Apostolic Palace, discussed, quote, various questions of relevance to the life of the Catholic Church in Russia, end quote. The Vatican said in a statement, adding that they also covered, quote, the ecological question and various themes relating to current international affairs, with particular reference to Syria, Ukraine, and Venezuela, end quote. Of course they brought up the ecological question, because the World Council of Churches, the United Nations, and Pope Francis have realized that the way to get everybody united, though secularism is a big part of it, though ecumenism is a big part of it, though getting rid of borders and trying to get everybody to use the same currency and to speak the same language and to, be willing to be the same race and all that other kind of stuff, why that's all part of it. The thing that's going to push it together and make it legally binding, and also that happens to touch on everything because it's going to get the religious people to make it religiously binding, and it's going to be a reason to get rid of borders because you need an international law, etc., is the climate change problem, right? So it's called. And, of course, the Pope is trying to get involved in the affairs of other nations, as is usual. Kind of surprised he didn't bring up Korea, but with the success that Trump has been having in Korea, I guess it makes a lot of sense. He probably feels like he can't, wield his power there, but nonetheless. The pair also expressed their satisfaction at the development of bilateral relations during the cordial discussions, the Vatican said. Thank you for the first time you have dedicated to me, Putin told Francis. Thank you for the time you have dedicated to me, rather, Putin told Francis. I don't know why I said first time. Quote, it was a substantive, interesting discussion, end quote, he told journalists present at the exchange of gifts in the private papal study. The Pope lashes out at blogging ambassadors, demands obedience. Of course he does. He finds himself infallible. It's Catholic doctrine, nonetheless. The meeting, part of Putin's one-day visit to Rome, comes a day before Catholic leaders from Ukraine gather at the Holy See to discuss the continuing conflict there and the fallout from the schism between the Russian and Ukrainian Orthodox churches. Even though that should obviously be a problem for the Orthodox, not the Catholics, but, global religion and ecumenism. The Vatican said the aim is to lend support, quote, in the delicate situation in which Ukraine finds itself, end quote. Last year, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine formally split from the Russian Orthodox Church in a schism recognized by the spiritual leader of the world's Orthodox Christians. The push for a full-fledged and independent Ukrainian Orthodox Church was bolstered by fighting in eastern Ukraine between government forces and Russian-backed rebels. Excuse me. Some observers believe that Putin's visit could be a prelude to a papal visit to Russia. No pope has ever set foot in Russia, but Putin's foreign affairs advisor said the issue wasn't on the agenda for the visit. Would not be surprised if that happened. Putin later met with Italian President Sergio Mattarella and Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. The bilateral meetings will be followed by a Russia-Italy forum with Conte and Italian Foreign Minister Enzo Moravero, I cannot speak. Putin will also meet privately with a longtime friend, former President Silvio Berlusconi, before returning to Moscow. Deputy Premier Matteo Salvini, Matteo Salvini, who has made no secret of his admiration for Putin, will attend a dinner with Putin at Via Madama. The two met face-to-face in Milan during Putin's visit in 2014 and Salvini's role as leader of the then Northern League. Quote, the League and its leader, Salvini, are active supporters of a restoration of full cooperation between Russia and Italy. They have spoken for a quicker abolition of anti-Russia sanctions introduced by the U.S. and EU. Here our points of view are aligned, end quote, Putin said. Putin has acknowledged that U.S. and European Union sanctions have cost Russia an estimated $50 billion since 2014, but he claims that the bloc's nations have suffered even greater damage because of the restrictions. The Russian president, on his first visit to Italy in 4 years, said in written response to Italy's daily Il Corriere della Sera that Moscow, daily Il Corriere della Sera, I don't know if I said that right, anyways, that Moscow didn't want to extend countermeasures against EU sanctions to Italy, but that it couldn't react selectively with the World Trade Organization, within the World Trade Organization, rather. Putin said that economic relations with Italy, Russia's fifth largest trading partner, are expanding despite the sanctions. Italian investments in Russia so far this year have reached $4.7 billion, with Russia $4.7 billion, by the way, while Russian investments in Italy in the same period were $2.7 billion. Two things. First thing, I'm obviously not happy when the Pope is doing anything that expands his political power. Excuse me. That includes meeting with the President of the United States, Congress of the United States, the President of Russia, Prime Minister of Israel. I don't care who he's meeting with. I don't like him getting involved in the world's political affairs because I don't like him. I don't trust him, right? I think he has an agenda. I think that agenda is perfectly clear, considering the fact that he's also really big on ecumenism, which, of course, is the reason he's going to be going to the Ukraine tomorrow, discussing issues of Orthodox faith, even though he is not an Orthodox patriarch. He is the Catholic Pope, nonetheless. I mean, I don't know. It just, I don't like it. It makes me very skeptical. It makes me sick. The only thing I can do really is just pray that, God's will be done, because that's really where we're at here at this point. Second thing, I'm skeptical, but I'm leaning towards I like, as far as Russia and Italy being pals. I would like for the West to at least be neutral with Russia. Maybe we can't be friends, but we can at least be neutral and not want to fight each other constantly. That would be great. Peace is always the better option if it can be attained without sacrificing your moral code, without sacrificing your freedoms. Other than that, I don't have much else to say, to be quite frank. But with that, I do think we need to move on now. Let's go ahead and go to another article about the Grand Blasphemous and his ecumenism. Pope Francis gives relic of St. Peter's bones to the Orthodox Patriarch. Tell me that does not sound like one of the cultiest things you've ever heard. They are literally trading people's bones, which they're then going to go pray over and say chants like Hail Mary, full of grace, blah, 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 while having their little wooden necklaces and thinking that somehow that raises their righteousness in the eyes of God. How does that not sound like a cult to you? How does that sound Christian or biblical or non-pagan? This is why when people say Catholics are Christian, I just have to question, by what definition could they possibly be considered Christian? This is clearly a different faith. Catholicism is easily as different from Christianity as Judaism is, or as Islam is. That is just a fact. Or as Jehovah's Witnesses are, or Mormons. That is just a fact. Excuse me. But nonetheless, let's continue into this article from the Catholic News Agency. The writer of this article is Courtney Grogan. A lot of women writing today. Interesting. Not that I have a problem with that, by the way. It's just something of note. Vatican City, July 3rd, 2019, 10:50 a.m. Grand Blasphemous gave unexpectedly... By the way, that's just my little editing there. Grand Blasphemous gave unexpectedly a reliquary containing what are believed to be bone fragments of St. Peter to the Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew, an ecumenical gesture that has generated controversy among some Catholics. Oh, that is the creepiest thing in the world. Why are you trading the parts of dead people? People who you acknowledge are just regular people, by the way. They're not gods or angels or something like that. And even if they were angels, by the way, still wouldn't be okay because there's only one God. But nonetheless, I mean, this is just the creepiest thing. This is something I would expect from necromancer orcs from World of Warcraft. Not alleged Christian priests. And I don't mean to question anyone's Christianity. I really don't like that. But it's just weird, okay? It's creepy to me that this is something that they do. The Grand Blasphemous took the reliquary from the chapel in the papal apartments where Pope St. Paul VI had placed the bronze reliquary containing 8 bone fragments after they were discovered in a 1952 dig under St. Peter's Basilica. I am sorry, my nose itches really bad. So if you keep seeing me pick my nose, I assure you I am not picking my nose. My mustache just keeps getting into my nose, so I am scratching my nose. I understand if that might be TMI for you, but I don't really care. You're watching my show, so... Go watch somebody else's show if you have a problem, I guess. A delegation from the Ecumenical Patriarchate, excuse me, of Constantinople, were guests at the June 29th Mass in St. Peter's Basilica for the Feast of St. Peter and Paul, as has been customary in recent years, and has been a greater part, this is, again, my editing, of the greater ecumenical movement. Oh man, my nose itches really bad. I hate being sick. Nose just gets super sensitive to everything. Anyways, after the Mass, Grand Blasphemous Francis brought Eastern Orthodox Archbishop Job to a chapel in the papal apartments. Man, I cannot talk. And offered the chapel's reliquary as a gift, according to the Vatican News. The bronze box bears the inscription, quote, "from the bones found in the hypogeum of the Vatican Basilica, which are believed to be of Blessed Peter the Apostle," end quote. Which I can almost guarantee they're not, by the way, considering the fact that the bones, unless they were mummified, would very obviously dissolve during that time. And I mean dissolve, like they would be gone at this point. They'd be as good as dirt. But nonetheless, even if they were the bones of Pope Francis, sorry, the bones of Peter, how is that? I don't know. Anyways, it's creepy. It's creepy. And it's kind of demonic. And the fact that the ecumenical movement is wrapped up in demonic gestures, handing the fragments of dead so-called apostles. And I don't say so-called apostles because Peter is a so-called apostle, but I say because it's allegedly the bones of an apostle. Very likely not, right? But nonetheless, it's just weird. It's creepy. It's demonic. It's satanic. Okay? And the fact that the ecumenical movement is filled with this garbage should really warn you if you're spiritually inclined. If you're not, you should still think it is weird that people who train around the dead body parts of other people want to unite the world under one global religion and one global governance. That should creep you out. And the fact that it's not a conspiracy theory that has nothing to do with the Illuminati or Nicki Minaj shaking her buttocks should also creep you out. But anyways, Francis had previously brought the bronze reliquary containing the purported bone fragments for public veneration to St. Peter's Square on November 24th, 2013, at a Mass for the Feast of Christ the King, where Eastern Patriarchs are also present. At the time of the public veneration in 2013, Francis spokesman Father Federico Lombardi said, quote, "there is a serious possibility these are St. Peter's bones, but we do not go beyond that." Clearly you do if you're calling them relics and trading them as an ecumenical gesture and praying over them. And even if you didn't go farther than that, even if you weren't just saying, I mean, why does it matter? Like, why is this normal to you, sir? Excuse me. The bone fragments were discovered in an evacuation of tombs under St. Peter's Basilica near Greek graffiti dating back to the year 160 that read, "Peter is here." Analysis of the bones found that they belonged to a man around 60 to 70 years old, and that they had been wrapped in purple cloth woven with gold. At the risk of stating the obvious, Peter died somewhere between 90 and 100 years before 160. So, there's that. On June 26, 1968, Paul VI said that the bones had been, quote, "identified in a way which we can hold to be convincing. We have reason to believe that the few but sacrosanct mortal remains of the Prince of the Apostles have been traced," end quote. The Orthodox delegation brought the reliquary to Istanbul, where Monsignor Andrea Palmieri, I think is how you say that, Undersecretary of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, personally gave it to Patriarch Bartholomew. Bartholomew, as Patriarch of Constantinople, is regarded as first among equals within the Orthodox communion, and is at least seen by many as the worldwide leader of Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy not as in literal Orthodox Christianity, but the sect of Orthodox Christianity. Orthodox Archbishop Job called the gesture another gigantic step towards concrete unity. Unfortunately, that is true. However, the move has generated controversy among Catholics. It is shocking how often I actually end up agreeing with traditionalist Catholics about how bad this is. Not that I trust them at all either. But anyways. Grand Blasphemous said in his meeting with the ecumenical delegation June 28th, quote, "The feast of Saints Peter and Paul, which falls on the same day in the liturgical calendars of East and West, invites us to renew the charity that generates unity," end quote. Sorry, not end quote. "I am increasingly convinced that the restoration of full unity between Catholics and Orthodox will come about through respect for specific identities and harmonious coexistence in legitimate forms of diversity. The Holy Spirit, for that matter, is the one who creatively awakens a multiplicity of gifts, harmonizes them, and brings them into authentic unity," end quote, the Pope told Orthodox leaders. Let's just point out that the reason that the Orthodox split from the Catholic Church in the first place was because they did not agree that the Pope was infallible. And that is not something that we can agree on. I'm not an Orthodox person, but I'm saying that, like, if you don't agree that that is true, there's no reason to have community with the Catholic Church. In fact, I would say if you don't think papal infallibility is true, then you can't have fellowship with Catholics in that way. And I am very hesitant to draw the line on sects to say which sects are heretical and which ones aren't. But I think calling a man the vicar of Christ definitely counts as heretical. Quote, I consider it valuable in our encounters to share our roots, to rediscover the goodness that the Lord has sown and made grow in each of us, and to share it, learning from one another and helping each other not to fear dialogue and concrete collaboration, end quote, Pope Francis said. There is so much else I can say, but we've already kind of gotten into unapologetics realm, so I'm not going to say it. What I am going to say, though, is we are getting closer and closer and closer to a one world government, to a one world religion, to a one world body of priests and politicians who control what we can and cannot say, whether or not we can have arms, our policies as far as what we can preach from the pulpit, our policies as far as who we can allow in or out of our country. We are getting closer and closer to it every single day. And you're seeing it on the political realm with the Chinese and the Congress and Israel and Russia all speaking with the Pope constantly. And you're seeing it in the religious realm with Shimon Peres and the different, the Buddhists and the Baha'is going to the World Alliance of Religions for Peace and the World Council of Churches and and Bartholomew of the Orthodox Church of Constantinople meeting with the Pope, right? We are progressing towards this incredibly quickly. And once again, I should not have to rely on your spirituality in order to convince you that this is a bad idea. Maybe I will have to rely on that. Maybe it is that this is one of those things where you have to be, spiritually right in order to see the problem here. But personally, I do think reason and logic does a lot for us, though I would argue, well, we'll get there in an apologetics. In other words, it just seems strange to me that this figure of all figures would be the conspiratorial figure wanting to take over the world. It seems very, very much a proof of my faith. But nonetheless, I shouldn't have to tell you guys why having somebody who thinks he is God in control of all the world's different religions or in control of the world's different political areas, I guess, right? Nations, and so to speak. Why that's a bad idea. I shouldn't have to tell that because it should be perfectly obvious. Do you want Jim Jones controlling the country or the world's religions? Well, what makes the Pope any different? They've slaughtered millions. According to many, they've slaughtered 68 million, some odd. You could call them Protestants, but basically non-Catholics, between 600 and 1,500. I mean, I don't know. I just... So many people seem to think that this is all some kind of a joke. Alex Jones used to be informed about this. I don't know if he is so much anymore, but... Anyways, I don't know. We only got 12 minutes, so... And I got 4 more articles I want to bring up, so... Let's try and get through this quick. From the Jerusalem Post, top EU foreign policy nominee has record of slamming Israel, praising Iran. We're going to go through this real quick. It's actually Iran. My apologies. But anyways... Jerusalem was not particularly fond of Mogherini, and now under Borrell, things might actually become more difficult. If past comments are any indication, Spanish Foreign Minister Josep Borrell Fontes, probably, nominated on Wednesday to be the EU's next foreign policy czar, will make Israel pine for Federica Mogherini. And Jerusalem was not particularly fond of Mogherini for the most part, cutting her out of the Mideast loop because of a perceived pro-Palestinian bias. It was not perceived. It was definitely a pro-Palestinian bias, let me assure you. Mogherini has not visited Israel on a working visit in some 4 years, though she did attend the funeral of Shimon Peres in September 2016. The last time she met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was during an ICU meeting in Brussels in December 2017, following U.S. President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a move she blasted and which she wanted the EU to condemn. Just another example of that assumed, or perceived rather, right, pro-Palestinian bias. Anyway, the move failed, however, because of an inability to reach a consensus among all 28 EU states. As a result of the EU's decision to label products from the settlements, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suspended diplomatic ties with the group in late 2015 for a reassessment. Though Israel has lifted that suspension, the relationship with Mogherini never recovered. Mogherini and the EU foreign policy apparatus she led were viewed in Jerusalem as staunchly pro-Palestinian, and as a cheerleader for the Iranian nuclear deal, even after Trump withdrew from it last year. She had planned a trip here in June 2018 to take part in the American Jewish Committee's Global Forum, but canceled it when it was made clear that Netanyahu would not meet her. Now, under Borrell, things might actually become more difficult. When Mogherini took over the helm of the EU's foreign policy apparatus in 2014, few outside of her native Italy had heard of her. The same cannot be said of Borrell, from the Spanish Socialist Party, who has been a fixture on the European political scene since the 1970s, serving as president of the European Parliament from 2004 to 2007. Of course. From 2004 to 2007, and as Spain's foreign minister since June 2018. As such, Borrell has left a long paper trail, and not one that will necessarily win hearts in Jerusalem. Regarding the Palestinian issue, for instance, he has come out in favor of EU countries unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state. EEU, the Spanish news agency, reported in September that he was leading efforts to get Madrid to recognize Palestine as a state. The EU officially, quote, the EU officially still supports a two-party state system for the area of conflict, with the Spanish Minister for Foreign Affairs and his government believe the bloc needs to readdress the issue and take decisions as a matter of urgency, end quote, the report said. The story quoted Borrell as saying, quote, it is obvious that the situation in Palestine must not continue as it is. If the EU is not able to reach a unanimous decision, then each to their own. Those are so itchy. Sorry, quote. End quote. In a scathing op-ed in the Spanish digital newspaper Republica.com in May of 2018, after the Nakba Day riots along the Gaza border, which took place in the U.S., as the U.S. was moving its embassy to Jerusalem and led to the deaths of dozens of Palestinians, I think 63 is the number, Borrell said Trump was encouraging the warlike arrogance of Netanyahu. He referred to the incidents that day in Gaza as a Black Monday that reflects the dehumanization of Palestinians by a large part of the Israeli political class and society. The irritation those opinions obviously triggered in the Prime Minister's office likely paled to the anger at what he has said about Iran. In an interview in February with Politico, the future EU foreign policy chief, said that everyone just has to get used to the fact that Iran wants to destroy Israel. Everyone just has to get used to that fact. And also, let's support Hezbollah and their EU nuclear deal. And then these people want to say that they're not anti-Israel. Whatever. Asked about the nuclear deal and whether it was dead, Borrell replied, quote, the Americans decided to kill it unilaterally as they do things without any kind of previous consultation, without taking care of what interests the Europeans have, end quote. Number one, point proven. Number two, I don't care what the Europeans have to say, and neither should the president. Bye. Quite frankly, you need us, not the other way around. And we are friends of Israel. Doesn't mean that you have to support everything Israel does, but when they say, hey, our capital is Jerusalem, it does mean you got to support that. When people say, hey, we want to nuke you, and also, by the way, want to nuke the Western nations who are totally letting us have nuclear technology, you probably shouldn't support that either. Just saying. Just a thought! But when have you ever had one of those unless you were sleeping with her? Asked whether the U.S. might, quote, have a point about Iran, end quote, given its vow to destroy Israel and its malignant behavior in the region, he said, quote, we are not children following what they, the Americans, say. We have our own prospects, interests, and strategy, and we will continue working with Iran. It would be very bad for us if it goes on to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran wants to wipe out Israel. Nothing new about that. You have to live with it. End quote. I don't know. How that doesn't just melt the minds of people doesn't process to me, but whatever. On November 6th, the day after the U.S. reimposed a last tranche. I've never heard that word. It's an interesting word. I wonder what that means. I'll look that up after the show. Of sanctions on Iran, Borrell joined Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in blasting the U.S. for the move. Yeah, I mean, there's no need for my commentary, right? There you have it. It's right in front of you. The Spanish foreign minister said that he rejected, quote, any kind of position that resembles an ultimatum from anyone and also from the United States, end quote. In February, on the 40th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, that led to the fall of the Shah and brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power, the Spanish diplomat posted a tweet thread somewhat sympathetic to the regime. Quote, today marks 40 years of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Hashtag Iran. He wrote, the regional power has changed a lot during this time. In 1976, the literacy rate was 35%. Now it's 84%. In 1980, 5% of women employed were university students. Now they are 47%, but only 16% of the workforce is female. And the unemployment rate of women is double that of men. Bear in mind that if you combined all executions in every Western country and Israel and Saudi Arabia, if you combined them, it would not even make a tenth of the amount of people who are executed every year in, well, it might make a tenth, but it certainly wouldn't make very much more than a tenth. It might make like just over a tenth of the people who are executed every year in Iran. But whatever. You know, because I guess having a 47% rate of women as university students is impressive. Bigotry of low expectations, friends. Bigotry of low expectations. Iran, he wrote, quote, is a key country in the Middle East region. It has had an essential role in the Syria war, helping Assad while the Americans are pulling out, end quote. He noted the strong competition that Shia Iran has had with Sunni Saudi Arabia, and then wrote, excuse me, of the two hard defeats of the United States in the 1970s, the flight from Saigon and the takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. 40 years later, he wrote, quote, Vietnam is a productive power fully integrated into the world economy and has excellent relations with the United States, end quote. In contrast, he said, quote, Iran remains an obsession for the U.S. government. They still do not have diplomatic relations, and Trump has also withdrawn from the nuclear pact and has imposed sanctions. Surely he can survive the sanctions if Trump is not, Iran can survive the sanctions, rather, if Trump is not reelected. Otherwise, the regime could reactivate the nuclear program for military purposes and multiply its interventions in the region, end quote. Yeah, there's a reason why we're still skeptical of Iran. It's because they threaten to nuke us as well as our allies. How is that not something that processes to you? Do you want the West to be destroyed, or are you just incredibly stupid? Genuinely curious. We're running out of time, so I'm going to go very quickly. These opinions are not only causing concern in Jerusalem, but also other countries in the region as well. This was the headline in the UAE-based newspaper, The National, reporting on this appointment, quote, nomination of Joseph Borrell for EU High Representative sparks outcry, end quote. The subheadline read, quote, a supporter of... I hate these things. The subheadline read, a supporter of the Iranian regime, Mr. Borrell will handle the EU's negotiations on the Iran nuclear deal, end quote. According to the report, quote, Borrell is a known supporter of Iran and has made several comments during his time as foreign minister, which were construed as being sympathetic to the regime, end quote. Borrell himself addressed the Knesset in June 2005 as the president of the European Parliament and noted his history with Israel. Quote, this is not a strange land to me, end quote, he said. Quote, 36 years ago in 1969, when I had just graduated, I came to Israel to work on a kibbutz, the one in Golan. Is that Golan? Golan? I don't know what Golan is. I think he means Golan. But anyways, following in the footsteps of other young Europeans attracted by that experience. Really quick, I want to apologize for the smut on the other side of here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it right now. I just noticed that that was being advertised here, so I greatly apologize. If it's even going to let me. Great. That's disgusting. Come on. And there's no way to get rid of it. Well, you see the point. I'm getting out of this article. I don't want to endorse that crap. So I'm getting out of this article now. You see the point. The European Union has nominated a foreign policy minister who is very pro-Palestine, who is very pro-Iran, who is anti-Israel, and this is the way that the world is going. And it's funny because a bunch of people like that moron Adam Green want to sit up here and say, I need to be nicer, sorry. Like Adam Green of No More News want to sit up here and say, oh, well, clearly the Jews are trying to take over the world and da-da-da-da-da, blah, 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 blah. Well, quick question. If the Jews are trying to take over the world, if they have control of the media and all the banks and all that kind of stuff, why is it that constantly every single country that is not the United States and like maybe 5 others is attacking Israel? Why is it that the European Union is nominating Josep Borrell and his, with his staunchly pro-Iran, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel record? Why is that? Is it possibly because most of the world hates Israel and Israel and the Jewish people don't actually have control of the world? I know that's a shocking concept, but it's probably true. Nonetheless, we're out of time. So here are the last 3 articles I wanted to talk about, but I'm not going to. World Churches Group and International Jewish Committee restore relations after 20-year hiatus. This is from Ecumenical News by Peter Kenny. You heard that correctly. The World Council of Churches and an International Jewish Committee have now restored their relations, leading us further down the path of ecumenism. So don't say I didn't warn you. Don't say it's just conspiracy. It's right in front of your face, and this is what they're trying to tell you. Also, there was an Abu Dhabi climate meeting that I wish we could have gotten to more. We will certainly get more to it on our next episode of the Watchdog. The meeting will bring together governments and leaders from all sectors, including businesses, local authorities, civil society, and the UN system and youth representatives. The article was published July 1st, 2019. But the purpose of the meeting is to take stock of progress across all the action areas of the Climate Action Summit, and another one of those ways that we are going faster and faster towards globalism. Also from InfoWars, far-left agitators brawled with Trump supporters and Secret Service after police responded to their burning American flags near the White House on Independence Day. This is just further violence in the United States, getting us closer and closer to a civil war that I think is inevitable at this point. Antifa and everybody fighting. I hope we can avoid it. I do not want violence. I want everybody to be able to protest and to be able to protest peacefully. I will say this much. I have to disagree with the conservatives who think that we should ban burning the flag or think that that is an arrestable offense. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean it's okay to attack conservatives. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching this 2-hour special, this 4th of July special of the Watchdog. If you liked this, please do like and share this video. Get it out to your friends. Of course, if you watch the live version, it's just black. But if you go to YouTube and watch the YouTube version, which we'll have later on tonight uploaded, you'll be able to see my fugly mug. Oh, that wasn't appropriate. Sorry. My lovely mug. As well as actually read the articles and, all that other good stuff. You got it. Audio quality is slightly better. You'll get to hear the songs that we played, and etc. If you like our content, please do subscribe here to TheCynicogue or like us on the American Cynic Party page, depending on where you're watching this. We have other social media websites, or not social media websites, social media accounts, like TheCynicogue on Minds, ACP Official on Gab, Terrestrial Earthbird on Twitter, and Cynic Thought on Instagram if you're interested in following us at any of those places. Leave any questions, comments, or concerns in the comment section below, and in the description of our YouTube video, you will be able to find links to all of the articles we had here today. Shalom, and for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, here is the Star Spangled Banner to end our Murica Day special. Have a great rest of your day.